Hi, and
Hello, Ami.
we're waiting for
Ano
Robbie
na?
Lampay, of
Yes, yes. Ed
So,
won't be with us tonight. Yeah.
yes, of course, we're all monitoring pa rin what's happening in the US. But what other headlines are you watching?
Well, the other headlines. Yung bagyo pa rin, yung
Oo nga.
aftermath. Yeah. Tapos yung COVID cases,
Yes.
dumadami.
Baka
Yeah.
daw dumami ngayong Pasko.
Na-knock off from the headlines for a while because of Rolly. Tapos US elections. Pero ngayon, napansin na lang natin na parang going toward 380,000 no?
Yes.
Oo. At saka parang nagbabanta nga raw na baka tumaas, no? Heading into Christmas.
Yes.
Kaya pinagbawal na ang video karaoke. Video okay. Para raw hindi mo na mag-party. Ay, nako.
Siguro, talaga natatabunan nga kasi ng election, but sige, talagang throughout the past 8 months, 7 or 8 months na, magka 8 months na, talagang puro pagdurusa And we are seeing that in the latest survey nga of the social weather stations.
Right, exactly.
So, and up to 82%, that's pretty high. No? So,
catastrophic.
Catastrophic na
kanilang category, di ba? Wow. Okay.
So,
parang bagyo,
siguro it's good na ang guest natin tonight is a member of SWS, Mr. Leo Laroza. He's the Director for Communications and Information Technology of Social Weather Stations. Good evening, Mr. Laroza.
Good evening, Leo.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Well,
hi, Robbie, Ma'am Lucy. Good evening po sa inyong lahat.
Good evening po. Mr. Laroza, you took it in September, and medyo mataas siya. Siguro you can explain, give us context compared to previous similar surveys of SWS on quality of life. Was it really the worst or medyo kapareho din naman in certain periods of the country?
It's in summary, it's a continuing worst. So
Continuing worst.
Yeah, it's a continuing worst. By the time we were able to conduct a phone survey in May 2020, we already saw the spike in the increase of losers or those who are worse off among the public. So we have to come up with a new term just to accommodate this excessively high.
So bago talaga itong catastrophic category?
Yes, this catastrophic category only started during this year, this pandemic. Before that, we only have extremely low as the lowest category.
When was this? When was it registered?
This was registered in 2008 during the rice and oil price crisis. So pre-pandemic, it was 12 years ago when we last had this high minus 50 kind of net gainers losers score. So
and this is across the country, across
in all areas,
Visayas and Mindanao, diba?
Yes, they're all continuing catastrophic measures in all areas.
Mr. Laroza, I guess on a certain level, parang we sense the urgency, the alarm, the severity of this. On another level naman, parang it's not necessarily a surprise. Everybody knows that 2020 has been catastrophic for everyone. So beyond that, was there anything in the data that you could parse that was unexpected to you?
Well, unexpected, not really, because we've been seeing the worsening of other indicators. We've seen the worsening of hunger. We've been seeing the worsening of joblessness. Especially joblessness. So all these indicators, we've been seeing the decline of these indicators since May 2020, even the self-rated poverty, but most especially joblessness, because joblessness, uh, we think, was the most affected during this pandemic. So it's
Now,
not really
mm,
unexpected, but the unexpected is the intensity or the gravity of how much
yes.
worse off people are now.
Mm.
Yeah.
But
In terms of
sorry,
In
Lucy,
terms
go
of
ahead.
the demographics, no, para lang alam natin kung anong pinag-uusapan. Sino yung pinaka losers, yun ang tawag nyo di ba?
Yeah.
Saan pinakamarami yung losers in terms of say age group and in terms of geographical location, in general ano yung pinaka loser sa
Yeah.
lahat?
Age-wise and geographic-wise, almost there's no clear distinction in terms of being losers, but we see the distinction among educational attainment, which is what we use as a proxy for socioeconomic class for the phone
Okay.
surveys. So
Okay. Okay.
we see much higher numbers of losers among those who have fewer formal education. So those groups are what we consider the vulnerable groups.
I see.
Um, Respondents or households with respondents with education that are lower than college graduates.
Okay, so the less educated, the more severely affected, no? So ano ba 'yon? Parang direct correlation, meaning yung mga grade school graduates lang or those who never went to school, yun ang talagang
Yes.
pero you would argue, Leo, na ito yung sinasabi nila na really how much more do they have to lose because most of them were
Mm.
really, poor anyway. Parang,
Yes.
you mean to say, nag-worsen pa yung
Yes, that's
poverty
true.
nila.
Yes,
Oo.
because the question is phrased in such a way that they have a point of comparison. We ask them to look at their quality of life 12 months ago or a year ago, so they have a clear idea of how to compare their current life simply
Yes.
just by comparing it with how it was a year ago. So it's
Oo.
always it's it's always a possibility to always say that
I
it's
mean,
worse off now.
and I don't know exactly how it's asked, but I guess it matters that the question is about kumusta yung buhay mo, hindi necessarily yung ang tanong itong sa kita.
Yes, exactly. The definitive term here is kung ikukumpara ang uri ng inyong kasalukuyang pamumuhay sa nakaraang 12 buwan, masasabi ba ninyo na ang inyong pamumuhay ay mas mabuti ngayon kaysa noon, kapareho ng dati, or mas masama ngayon kaysa noon? So those are the
Okay.
exact Filipino phrasing.
So kumbaga going to Luci's question, di ba? Parang kumbaga kung maliit yung kinikita mo dati or wala kang trabaho dati, wala kang trabaho ngayon, you would presume na hindi necessarily nagano. But sa buhay mo encompasses everything. That you cannot go out, you do not see your friends, your lifestyle does
Yeah.
take a hit.
Yes.
Yes.
Oo.
It's uri ng pamumuhay. So that's all-encompassing how they look at their current quality of life.
Okay,
Hindi
kayo.
hindi specify. When you talk to them, you don't specify. Kasi syempre tatanungin din ng, this is a phone, this is a phone survey, di ba? Tinatanong ba nila kayo, what do you mean exactly by quality of life, by uri ng pamumuhay? Tinatanong ba nila kayo?
Yes, we have, nagtatanong din sila, but the way we do it or the way we probe it is just we leave them, we let them define it. Sa tingin nyo po, ano po sa tingin nyo? Pag
Okay.
sinabing kasalukuyang uri ng pamumuhay, kayo po, sa tingin nyo po ang uri ng inyong pamumuhay. So we're not feeding them specifics. We just stay consistent with what the definitive terms are, and these are uri ng inyong pamumuhay. So,
So mostly, ang sinasite nilang factor is economic ba? Economic ang sinasite nila sa paghihirap nila.
Yeah.
it's not even, we're not even using terms like economic, financial, or anything
Sweldo.
else. Yes,
Oo, hindi nila sinasabi.
we just
Hindi,
leave it to them
pero-
how they understand it.
Oo. So, hindi ba nila, halimbawa, wala bang voluntary description? Like,
No.
do they kumbaga, hindi nyo naman ni-lead yung answer,
No, yeah.
di ba?
Yeah.
But did they say things like, lagi kaming gutom ngayon, mas madalang na ang kain namin, or lahat kami ngayon nawala ng trabaho, dati 3 lang kaming walang trabaho, ngayon lahat na kami. Meron bang mga ganong
Yeah. It's not recorded in the final raw data, but we take note of those comments. We have no follow-up question kasi for this question. Aside from we avoid follow-up questions as much as possible because it kind of gives the impression that we're asking the respondents to justify their answers. But also because phone interviews, we have very limited time. We can only have their attention and their cooperation to at most 20 minutes. So, but we take note of those side comments that they volunteered, that if they volunteered uri ng pamumuhay because nagutom sila or uri ng pamumuhay dahil kulang na ang kanilang pera, it's not in the final raw data, but we have notes of those responses.
Okay, dati sabi ni presidential spokesman Harry Roque, nagulat siya na actually hindi 100%, no? Parang kumbaga, he decided to look at the glass half full by saying, buti nga hindi 100% eh. In the context of that reaction, do you think this is still catastrophic, or tama ba siya in saying na actually buti nga hindi lahat eh, or hindi na pwedeng idahilan yon?
This is a very bad news, and of course we have to look at it in a bigger picture. It's better to appreciate this kind of long time series of data by looking at the longer series. And if you just look at the longer series, it's really heartbreaking to see such very high levels. And it's up to the interpretation of people, but of course, a negative news is a negative news.
Yes.
And historically, this is the worst that we've seen this indicator to be this bad. So it's not so, well, downplaying it is not something that, for example, us do, because if you just look at the history, this is the first time we're seeing this as well. So it's really bad.
But a lot of it is intangible. I guess that's what people are trying to grasp it, because I'm looking at other numbers from your recent surveys, diba? We talked about joblessness, unemployment, 39%, 40%, ganyan. Tapos experienced hunger is only 30, well, not only, malaki pa rin yun, 30%. But relative to the 80+% who are now in this catastrophic, I mean, may gap, no, between yung hunger and having experienced hunger and the larger number of, in general, sumama ang buhay ko.
Yeah. So different indicators react differently to certain crises. And for example, if we look at hunger really is a deeper kind of deprivation. It's not something that you imagine. It's something, the way we ask it is involuntary hunger. You really experienced it. This one, the gainers, losers, is really just assessing yourself, how you are. So some indicators would really react in terms of intensity. They will react differently. Joblessness also reacted differently, but if you just look at the series, that's how it's a better way of comparing indicators. You compare it with itself at different points in time, not with each other, because they're measuring different levels of deprivation. Hunger is a deeper kind of deprivation. Self-rated poverty is measuring how household heads look at their own family. Are they poor or not poor? And this one
Okay.
is losers, gainers. They're looking at how they live, how the quality of their life. So really, it's the best way is to look at it in a longer series, and that's how best to compare quality of life indicators.
Leo, this is a serious question, but mahabang kwento to. But I am curious on how you settled on the word catastrophic. Like, seriously, because you go from extremely low, and then you have this dilemma that on the one hand it expresses a real urgency and a real problem that has to be communicated. On the other hand, SWS is a very scientific organization, very disciplined. So how do you settle on a word like catastrophic? And for that matter, what were the other candidates after extremely low? What other words could have captured this situation but didn't quite capture it, and therefore you settled for catastrophic?
It took us one. It took us. We were one survey late in coming up with this term catastrophic, and it has. We were already releasing the May, and as of May, we have not used the word catastrophic yet. But by July, and we've seen that there's it's staying up there. This is the second time this high bad number is here. So it's um, it's a decision that there were many heads thinking about this term. We already have extremely low. We already have execrable when it comes to satisfaction with public officials. So we are looking at gainers, losers. So, and in the gainers, losers history, this indicator reacts. Um, it reacts. It's how you call this? It's reactive to the events, to the crisis. Here you can see, for example, chart one. We plot the events. So we're talking about events, uh, and we have no other candidate that can no candidate term that can exceed extremely low, except for that one.
Catastrophic. Of course,
This
Catastrophe.
study, oh, go ahead, Ami.
Mr. Larosa, you're the techie. You're a techie in the group now. I want to ask you about how hard it is to conduct a phone survey in this pandemic, in quarantine. Nakakakuha ba kayo ng mga tao na sinasabi, oy, scammer ka lang, huwag mo nga ako balahin? Marami bang ganong reaction? Or are you interviewing people that you, or groups that you also used to interview? Okay naman yung reaction sa survey?
Yes, overall the reaction was very favorable. It was a favorable environment for us, especially the first time we did it. Kasi as of May 2020, it was I think it was at at the highest level of lockdown. So people were staying inside and they're not going places. They're just there at their homes, except for people authorized to go out. So we actually had a higher response rate in terms of being cooperative and having successfully completed an interview. It's higher than the pre-pandemic days when we were doing phone interviews. So that's the good. That's the I won't say it's the positive side, but as a method, as a mode of interview, it worked. It worked well for us because people were not quick to reject your call. They were very accommodating of a phone call, and they were very cooperative. Even if we get disconnected, we can redial and get them
But
again.
Leo, how do you reassure them? So I for example get
SWS, yes.
I get an unregistered number calling me, and I pick up the phone, ganon, and then you
Yes,
say SWS,
Kakarap yun.
and I take it on good faith na taga SWS to kahit hindi ko kilala.
yes. But then I forgot to mention that the database of numbers that we use as the universe, sampling universe for our respondents has been collected since 2017. Since
Ah,
2017. So in
okay.
2017, when we were doing our scientific face-to-face interviews, we had a we were already looking ahead at building up a database of phone numbers so that in the future we can use it like exactly like this. So we were
Oh,
able to gather more than 50,000 numbers since,
Ah,
Mm.
and these numbers,
okay.
of course, they were given with permission.
Mm.
So
Yes. Oo,
it
kung hindi,
makes yeah, phone
madudong sa
numbers.
privacy.
sasara mo na lang yung telepono. Sino ka
Yes,
ba?
yes, of course,
Baka
but
mahagla kayo.
the same problems also exist. Some numbers are already deactivated because we've been gathering this since 2017, and in 3 years some numbers can be transferred to other people. So
Kaya nga.
we have the same problem as with face to face. Face to face, offhand, some respondents can just say no to you and they won't let you in your house. So it's the same thing with phone interviews. You have to have a very nice approach right away when they said hello. They
Mm.
won't know it's SWS, by the way. It's
Mm.
but
Mm.
the first few seconds of the introduction, of course, they should know that it's SWS that's calling them for a
Mm.
public opinion survey.
Okay,
So
Leo, just to be clear, no, when you say catastrophic, you're really referring to the rate. I mean,
yes,
the high number of losers. You're not necessarily referring to the quality of life that the respondents were describing, right? It's not like they feel they're in a catastrophe, as in
yes,
during a
yes.
typhoon. Hindi yun, di ba?
Hindi yun yun.
Oo. So,
I can be a loser now, but only because I feel worse off compared to a year ago. But
yes.
it's not this. It doesn't mean that I'm in a catastrophic state. The
And it
catastrophic
doesn't
refers to the
measure
number.
yes, plus it does not really measure the severity of the loss,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes, yes,
Oo. It's not
yes,
like dati, kunyari, 50,000 ang sweldo ko. Ngayon,
yes.
walang-wala ako. Hindi ganon, ano? Hindi ganon.
Yes, we
It
don't
could
have.
be from
We don't have
50,
data for that.
naging 30 na lang. Ganon yun eh, no? Something
Yes,
like
yes,
that. Oo.
yes.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so how soon can SWS conduct face-to-face interviews again? Kasi yung the other pollster, they have resumed face-to-face. Ang SWS, kailan kaya?
I think it's already been mentioned in one of Dr. Mangas's column that we already conducted a face-to-face interview, face-to-face survey locally, not yet
Yes.
nationwide.
Yung
So
nationwide. Kailan?
nationwide, very soon. I hope. We hope that we can resume regular face-to-face interviews soon, but of course, with the proper health protocols in
Mm.
place.
Okay, quick question lang, Leo. In a worst case scenario na limited pa rin ang movement nyo and limited pa rin ang options nyo, are you ready for the coming elections? 2021 is right around the corner and it's gonna be survey season as well. And what do you see happening in the survey sector?
Well, we always do our best to reach all the unreachable areas. As far as sampling is concerned, we stick to the best that we can to reaching places. So it will be the same thing for this season, and um, hopefully, transportation, because that's the only limitation that we see now. That's the only hindrance to our face-to-face operation, face-to-face survey operation. It's the presence of public transportation. Once it opens up in most areas, then we're good to go.
Okay. Mr. Leo Laroza, Director for Communication and Information Technology of Social Weather Stations. Thank you for joining the Chiefs. Good evening po.
Salamat, Leo.
Good evening po, and maraming salamat po.
Yes, I
Maraming
will
salamat.
Thank you, thank you.
go away. We'll be back.
Welcome back, the Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay. Before we resume our conversation, let's take a quick look at current election numbers in the U.S. from the Associated Press in partnership with News 5. Ano ba nakikita natin? May nagbago kaya?
Iba-iba yung mga charts no? This one is this from Reuters ba to?
This is AP from
AP,
according
yes.
to...
Kasi meron ng binibilang na yung
Reuters pala. Reuters pala to. Reuters.
Yeah. Kasi doon sa iba, 264 na eh.
Yes,
binigay na yung Michigan.
Di ba? Yeah. Oo.
But anyway, just to remind people, we're still waiting. The big prize, of course, is still Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Di ba? Yan pa rin yung inaantay natin.
Yes.
And it's practically, it's not only mail-in versus election day voting, it's also practically urban center versus the rural areas.
Rural areas, yeah.
And in the
Pero
meantime,
kasi the bulk of the votes that have yet to be counted are, on the one hand, in the key centers like Philadelphia, and then mail-in votes. And both tend to skew towards Biden.
Yes.
in the meantime, nagpala ng case si Trump to stop.
Okay. Anyway, hindi
in Pennsylvania.
hindi pa, ready na ba ang guest natin? Are we ready? Okay, nandito na ba siya? No? Okay. So, hindi pa po natin ang alam, pero buti na lang po, nandito po ang ating guest to tell us kung ano mangyayari sa US elections. We have with us former Senator, former Defense Secretary, and kapatid, Orly Mercado.
Hi, Senator Orly.
Hi. Akala ko sasabihin mo, former young man.
So, before anything else, so many questions. Buti na lang nandiyan si Orly Mercado with all the answers. Mr. Mercado, ano mangyayari sa US?
Well, I'm like anybody else, just watching media reports as far as the American elections are concerned. Pero talagang this is really, we've heard it already. They said it's very important elections. For some, it might be the end of a nightmare. And for those who are not too inclined to jump from one extreme to the other, kasi meron naman mga positive statements. I like the statement of Vice President Biden, where he stressed the need to be a president of all Americans, because I don't think, well, of course, in the 60s, active na ako noon eh. Talagang grabe yung mga civil rights marches noong mga panahong yon, Selma and others. But today, talagang pangita yung how deep, napakalalim ng cultural divide and political divide ng Estados Unidos. Grabe.
Polarized.
Oo.
Yeah, grabe.
Akalain natin na magkakaroon ng because of the pandemic, you would have a landslide.
Yes.
But you don't have a landslide. You
Yeah,
have something that is,
fighting, no?
yeah, talagang meron talagang whatever Trump does, they,
Yes, of
he represents sa kanila. Talagang napakalalim ng angst ng kanilang marginalization. At ito yung mga puti, no? Pag tinignan mo naman yung kasaysayan, talaga namang ang buhay nila. In the Second Industrial Revolution, sila ang nasa forefront dahil sa yung manufacturing, yung assembly line. Alala mo yung how after the war, the United States built an
Silang
economy.
nagbangon. Yeah.
Ay, naku, parang China noong 1990s na talagang bumulusok sila. And in 3 decades, binura nila yung poverty. Ganyan ang nangyari sa Amerika noong araw. And you could see also how they have been marginalized by this fourth industrial revolution na technology, information technology. Ano na yan? Yung mga basically non-college graduates, they were in the mines, they were in manufacturing, etc. And it's a very deep problem. I don't think it will be solved immediately. Naalala ko, nakikita ko sa CNN, meron silang isang cartoon doon na there is practically no room in the middle. Talagang, and it's a very emotional experience, mostly painful, even for families. Sa mga kapatid ni Susie nasa States nag-iingat ako, hindi ako nagsasalita ng tungkol sa politika. Divided merong
Yeah, sabi ko nga, actually, within families, no?
But Orly, of course,
No, go ahead, Robbie. Go ahead, Robbie.
But Mr. Mercado, of course, we invited you here. We'd like to invite you to put on your defense secretary hat and build us some scenarios for us. I mean, what's in it for the Philippines, whether it's a Biden presidency or an extension of the Trump administration?
Alam mo, a lot of people are a little bit, if you look at how Trump has actually overturned or rocked the international liberal order, talaga napakabigat ang nangyari, no? Sa yung decision niya sa climate change, yung decision niya nila sa Iran agreement, his embrace of Israel at the expense of the gains that have been done towards incremental towards building a two-state agreement, a two-state agreement to settle the issue. Napakaraming mga innovative. At saka yung faith in international organizations, multilateral organizations, NATO and United Nations. Pero mo, umatras dun sa World Health Organization sa gitna ng pandemya. Isipin mo with them at the top of the pandemic, isipin mo talagang wala nang pupuntahan yung botong yan kung hindi talagang a landslide against him. Pero hindi nangyari.
Hindi landslide.
Oo. So, mag-iisip tayo.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Yeah. Bakit nga ba hindi nagiging decisive yung win ni Biden, no? And even if he does win, di ba? There's still at least some room to doubt nga whether he was a clear winner because obviously he's not headed toward clarity of victory. Bakit nga ba? Ba't ang lakas pa rin ni Trump?
Well, I'm not too sure about but sabi ko malalim ang mga disagreements. Pero kaya ako binabanggit yan. Kasi ang tanong ni Robbie, ano ba yung magiging implication sa atin? Siguro, pag nag-zoom out tayo, makikita naman natin na maliit lamang naman tayo dun sa mundo ng relasyon ng Estados Unidos with other countries.
Yeah.
But it is also important. What I'm trying to say, basically, is that in terms of the changes of the change, whether it's Biden who wins, which looks like it's likely if tonight, if
The
Pennsylvania and Georgia take the path where most people think it will go, at least the Democrats, that's going to happen. But whoever wins, we have a basic partnership. Our only treaty ally in terms of defense and security is the United States. We have no other partner in terms of our security. Sabi nga ito lang pinakasalan natin Dapat pangatawanan na yun in a sense. Now, that doesn't mean that it should tie our hands completely, not to be able to play the game in the area, mindful of the fact that the Americans will pursue a strong commitment to the defense treaty only if it is in the interest of in the national interest of the United States. That's given. That's basic yan Dapat lagi natin sinasabi naman nung araw pa you know, you have to think of defense and security in terms of how you can protect yourselves. Unfortunately, we have had a culture of thinking small. We have I sit in DAP and also in Ateneo and ASOG, teaching men in uniform as regards, they make papers, commandant's papers and thesis, etc. Yun ang dinadram ko. Sabi ko, dapat mag-isip tayo ng malawak. Ngayon, napaka-importante ng Amerika, but we cannot put all of our, all of what we have and push it on the table and embed it on the United States. That having been said, we can manage and what do you call this? Navigate ourselves in this issue. Ngayon, going back to Trump, he's a disruptor in foreign relations. Talagang, what is done to NATO, what is done to UN, etc. It's really a great disruption. We lament it. However, to a certain extent, I think it will benefit us. Largely because of the fact, when you come to think of it, these disruptions, extreme as they are, going from one end extreme to the other, has also been a catalyst. Napuwersa ang mga Amerikano na talagang magpakita ng mas matigas na presensya, their stronger presence in the South China Sea, and to back up all of its actions, largely because of the fact that they have already, we're part of the upping the ante in terms of their trade war. In other words, nakikinabang din tayo dun sa blast.
Trade war nila. Yeah.
The Democrats were more, they use building blocks and they're patient. But unfortunately, I think to a great extent, the major contribution of Trump, if he exits now and his term gets over, is precisely being a catalyst into really strengthening our position. But then again,
what does that mean? What does that mean? Do you say that a Biden presidency, in effect, will bring us back to a softening of United States presence, as you call it, in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea, and in their, showing strength and flexing muscles in that area to our disadvantage? Is that what you're saying?
No. What I'm saying is that there is this move, and it was to a certain extent to our benefit. However, we cannot also dismiss it and say, just let's say he exits, and then you have the Democrats, you have Biden. I don't think that's changed really that much. And I also think, I believe, that the changes or the impact of what Trump has done, negative as they were, in disrupting you are toppling over the apple cart to a certain extent will still be felt because
Actually, I
it
was
is.
going to ask you about that, ano. Sinasabi nila, under Biden presidency, masusustain actually yung, in fact, they're saying he has similar policies when it comes to China. He has quite similar policies with Trump,
Yeah.
whether on trade or on security and on South China Sea. Do you also see that same thing? At saka he cannot afford at this point. Ang pagkakain pa lang daw, in fact, some people in the US are saying mas delikado for China si Biden because he is a multilateralist and he could actually put together an international coalition that will back the US position in these disputed areas when it comes to, well, engaging or confronting or whatever you call it, when it comes to China. Do you share that observation?
Oo, talaga sa akin, merong positive yung ginawa ni Trump. Bagamat kung iisipin natin, it's really disruptive. But the era of being politically correct or being patient in building blocks is fine, you know. But while he failed in his attempts to have rapprochement with North Korea, sa totoo lang, yung mga standing agreements nung araw na you don't meet until you don't give credence and political gains to a dictator just without any quid pro quo. Pero sa ano yan, sometimes yung bara-bara sa boxing nakakatama.
Nanalo. Oo.
And I think that is
Kakabira niya kahit paano. Yeah.
Anong i-advise? Let's go to Biden. So si Biden ang manalo, what would you advise him in terms of how you deal with our president? He saw how he dealt with Barack Obama, and he saw also how President Duterte adjusted his relationship with President Trump. If it were President Biden, what would your advice be to President Biden on how to approach and build the relationship with President Duterte?
Well, actually, napakaraming mga nagsasabi na napaka-importante ng personal rapport ng mga leader. That's true. That may be true in many instances. But that is not all in terms of diplomacy. Sa totoo niyan, public diplomacy is critical, etc. An approach that is multilateral is also, you have to value the power of international organizations and the value of the international community's opinions. No? And this is where we may have strength because we are a small country and we don't have so many things except diplomacy and a commitment to defend what is truly ours and what is lawful. We have international law behind us. No, I think that's everybody should watch the lecture of Justice Tony Carpio on what we are going to lose just in case magpabaya tayo dito sa South China Sea. But at the same time, I think what has happened during Trump's time has also made us reconsider and study very carefully itong how to behave in this hybrid warfare that has been foisted upon us and that we are at this point losing. when we can actually excel in hybrid warfare in as much as we are tied in terms of our security. We are not going to put up nuclear weapons. Our constitution does not allow it, and that is not in our that's not in our public policy, our constitution. The point that I'm trying to say is that may mga bagay-bagay tayo in a hybrid policy, in a hybrid warfare. There are many things that can be done. There is so much to do that can even mirror what is being done by China, and that can strengthen our position. At the same time, yung mga requirements of big power muscling in and out, we will leave that if to the commitments that we have been given under the U.S. Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty.
Orly, you were also formerly ambassador to ASEAN. And I just want to ask again, in the context of a possible Biden presidency, yung pivot to Asia ni Barack Obama, wala namang nangyari. Diba? I mean, do you see anything going in that direction if Biden wins? And what do you see as the dynamics that could affect ASEAN?
Well, ang problema talaga ng the way I look at it, and I've spoken and I've written a few chapters and papers on this issue. The problem with ASEAN is that we want it to be central in our lives of the 10 countries that are, but at the same time, we're not willing to give up part of that sovereignty that we have to be able to create a stronger union. You know, ASEAN, unfortunately, has not been able to come up with even a common position on even very basic issues like climate change. We cannot come up with a common stand.
I've heard it said that the only thing that binds us is China.
Yes. that may be, but then again, you cannot have a ASEAN way wherein when everybody has to agree, and if one holds out, China is a threat, okay, for several countries, especially those that have interest in the South China Sea. But you have Cambodia, you have Laos, you have Myanmar that share borders with China, and by that, nakikita naman natin behavior ng Vietnam. Vietnam is sa akin, napaka-importante modelo yan. It's an important model of how to stand strong on your position.
Independent. Yes.
Right?
Well, kaya nga, so curious ako doon. Bakit nga ba what's keeping ASEAN nations from agreeing on a common ground for issues like climate change and other global issues that we now have to take a stand on? What's keeping nations in ASEAN from doing that?
Kasi
Is it a culture? Is it their unique relations, the diplomatic relations or ties with other countries outside of the region? Ano bang factor?
Ang ASEAN kasi, there is what we call the ASEAN way. It's building consensus. You build consensus. Hindi nagbabutuhan yan eh. You do not put it into a vote. You work and develop a consensus. It's not totally bad. Sa totoo naman yan eh. There are many things that we have common efforts and agreement, full agreement, and things that are functioning against terrorism, piracy. There are many things that migrant workers, etc.
Do you think the code of conduct might be a platform for
Yan ang mga Chinese naman na talagang ginugulangan tayo ng mga Latin eh. Drenable yan. 2002 pa yung code of conduct.
Pero madami din ang pinagdiktahan ng China eh. Diba?
Oo. Papayag lang sila tapos dribble na naman nila. In the meantime, they've constructed, structured, militarized it, and it's no longer hybrid warfare. Talagang militarized na yung mga posisyon. They have practically parked right in areas where they've taken control over Scarborough Shoal.
Yes.
You know,
Well,
it's
ang ginagawa ngayon ng US is to build an Indo-Pacific coalition. Do you think
Yeah.
under Biden it will have a stronger chance of cohesion?
Oh.
Sa way na yan to Australia and New Zealand, no? Yung Indo-Pacific to India, does it have a better chance of becoming a strong, well, it's not really a grouping, but
yeah, it's not an alliance. It's not a military alliance, but I think these are very important steps to be able to check the wanton disregard of China of our territorial rights, maritime rights. No, it is to my mind. Basta merong ganyang grupo ng ano, we should be part of it and participate in it. And look at the ways and means by which we can further our cause. Or else we would end up having just a sliver of maritime resources that are practically give up the entire pag-asa to the Chinese.
What about yung VFA abrogation? What can you say about that? They're saying now that mabuti naman at sinuspend nga yung abrogation, but there's also a deadline for deciding whether or not to abrogate, right? Ano sa tingin mo ang mangyayari dyan with the Biden presidency? Will President Duterte have second thoughts about fully abrogating?
Tama naman talaga sa akin naman eh. You know, even when in 1991, September 16, 1991, the Senate voted to reject the basis agreement. And I was one of the 12 that voted against the basis. No? Yeah. And they removed the basis as a consequence. Itong issue nito overshadows the fact that there is still, and we did not reject and we did not change the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. Yes. The basis agreement was rejected, but the Mutual Defense Treaty has remained.
Yes.
When I was secretary, Pentagon wanted to restart the Balikatan exercises, and it became one of my responsibilities to convince the Senate to approve the Visiting Forces Agreement. And to convince the Senate that it was in our mutual interest with the United States to be able to have the exercises being conducted. And isipin mo, ang presidente nun, si Erap, at saka ako, pareho kami nag-reject ng bases. And yet, I went to the Senate and appeared before...
And defended the VFA.
And the VFA. And I even brought... Secretary William Cohen here. And sabi nga sa akin it was the longest Senate hearing as ever. He was a former senator. Yes. Even he never thought that he would last from 7 o'clock up to 11 in the evening. Dinner namin, continuous yung questioning ng lot. But we were able to pass it. Yeah. And I think that's the point there is that let's look back at where we came from, where we are, because that's the only time we'll be able to understand where we are now. And then look at this, how to approach this new relationship with a new president, and make sure that we do not go back in terms of our understanding of their commitment. As far as they're concerned naman, they have said, we have repeatedly made the commitment, there were the statement, etc., etc. But actually, in reality, the most telling statement are actually the voyages, patrol of the American Navy or Navy in the South China Sea. Yung kanilang.
You just said new president. You call the election na.
Ano yun? Ang
Slip of the
bias.
tongue.
Headline yan bukas sa Philippines na sources say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ako'y nakikiramay sa pagyao ni Madam Auring. Pero I'm more interested in filling her shoes.
Okay.
I do not
Okay, and unfortunately, we've run out of time. Former Senator and former Defense Secretary Orly Mercado, thank you for joining the Chiefs.
Thank
evening
you,
po.
sir.
Maraming salamat po.
And then that will be all for this special edition of the Chiefs. We hope the guest here will keep the conversation going. I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News.
Pilipinas. Dito lang sa PTV. Unlad, Pilipinas. Balitaang para sa bawat Pilipino. Walang tigil na pagsubaybay sa mga kaganapan. Walang patid na pagkalat ng impormasyong makatutulong sa sambayanan. At laging inuuna ang kapakanan ng bayan. Hatid ng mas pinalakas na puwersa ng PTV News. Kasama sila Yusek Rocky